if it is being slideshow mode, you can start, ma'am. Or otherwise, I'll be presenting, ma'am.
Okay, I'll just go ahead. I'll just check out if that works. Can you see it? Okay.
No, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. I'll be presenting, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead. So shall we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So good afternoon, all of you. All the aspirants who are willing to go for research. There might be some students who are undergoing graduation, post-graduation, or pursuing doctoral studies. I can see there are some doctoral scholars also, along with the other team. So today we will be majorly discussing on various effective techniques of writing a thesis. So before we get to understand what thesis is, we have to first understand why we write it out. Thesis is a compilation, a lengthy part of your academic journey, which is in a writing form that represents your overall study based on the research that you have conducted and results you have concluded. First, understand what is research. So, research is basically nothing but a very systematic study towards facts and data collection, understanding the sources of various information, and then leading to a conclusion. And that conclusion has to contribute into something, leading to new conclusions. That word is more appropriate. So the structure of a thesis varies depending on your field that you have chosen. I mean, it is different in humanities, little different in social sciences, and different in pure sciences. Okay, next slide, please. So, for example, if we consider humanities, then it is usually written in a form of a long essay, developing an overall sense of argument revolving around the central thesis. The chapters are organized by diverse case studies and themes. Now, see, this chapter of conclusion is not necessary, findings and discussion not necessarily separate in every domain. In certain domains, it is combined, for example, such as in qualitative social sciences. The discussion always is combined or interwoven with the result section. Okay. Whereas if we consider empirical study, which is based on the facts which are already available there, historical facts, let's say, the subjects like sciences or social sciences, the thesis is going to feature all the components that we discussed below. In certain cases, they are dealt with in a separate chapter, while in other cases, they are combined, such as in social sciences, as I say. Next slide, please. So this is overall common structure thesis, though written in sciences, social sciences, or humanities. These are some common parts you may find. So, introduction of your topic, literature review, methodology, result section, discussion, and conclusion. Usually, all these parts are divided into around 4 to 5 chapters in every kind of thesis, and then it has to be systematically divided. For example, chapter 1 undergoes introduction of your topic, which talks about your research methodology, hypothesis, research problem, aims and objectives. And so if you have chosen certain novel, let's say, or certain author, or you are undergoing certain case study, you have to give a brief information about that. Second chapter usually deals with the theoretical framework, in which you have to talk about the method of your investigation, the framework which you are applying and using for your study, and then what would be your tentative chapterization like? What is your chapterization? Not tentative. When you write thesis, it becomes a chapter. When you write in a synopsis, becomes a tentative chapter, right? There in every chapter. And then there come the sections of analysis where you talk about the results of your investigation, the you have collected, you analyze those in one or two chapters, basically, that is in chapter 3 and 4. Let's say if your thesis is length, data is amount, and then last chapter is dedicated for your discussion session or finding session or conclusion session, where you have to put forth your argument, you whatever you have analyzed the data, what are the results, what are the conclusions you have come across, new conclusions you have arrived at, and then if there is any contribution from your side, you can talk about that in the last section. Next slide, please. So these are practically certain stages involved or steps involved in before you start writing or your research. You should consider these steps in your mind first. First thing, you have to choose your topic very carefully. Please do not start with something where there is largely any scope, hardly any scope for any kind of investigation or any contribution. So the things which are already concluded or there is a dead end, don't go for that. So you have to choose such topic which is hardly trodden, explored, and then there is a large scope for you to explore something in and contribute something new from your side. Now, when we say contribute something new, doesn't mean that you cannot touch something that has already been there or already done by other scholars, previous scholars. You definitely can refer to the studies of previous scholars. You can even take that as your foregrounding for your research. You can argument on the conclusions they have made. You can give cross opinions. You can even showcase how those studies were not complete or how those opinions might be true in that case scenario are not applicable in today's time. Many times it happens, whenever we in whatever discipline we are, we check about the historical development of that particular section, right? For example, how our studies used to be done in ancient time. So it was a very traditional method that is known as grammar translation method, where teacher used to come in the classes, give the teaching used to happen through lecturing methods, and student hardly had any scope to interact with the teacher or put their questions forth or arguments. That scenario changed as the time changed, and now the methodologies are more student centric. So everything is designed, the syllabus, curriculum, activities, everything is designed according to the needs, fulfilling the student center here. So we see there are large developments happening at the time passes on. So you may go for certain kind of theory which had different conclusion, and you may find some different aspect. You can go for that kind of topic also. So the topic has to be important to the wider academic community. It should not be focused only on small community benefiting to only limited number of people. It should largely benefit to a large number of people. There should be an opportunity to showcase your thoughts and ideas. Unless and until there is some scope where you can put forth your idea, how your conclusions are really practical and applicable. Unless and until you have that scope, you cannot showcase your research. So that is why you have to be very careful while choosing your topic. Very important thing is your topic has to have a time frame, time bound. Many people always aspire. I mean, this is where the new scholars commit mistake. So they choose a topic which is very superficially aimed. Superficially aimed, I mean, very large topic. You feel like investigating each and every aspect of certain large umbrella term. Now, aspects of umbrella term, investigating an umbrella term is something impossible that cannot be concluded in one amount of study. I mean, for say if you are talking or if you are studying on a population race or raise in the population in the world, it's very difficult because you have to consider each and every country, the development of a population happening through many years, from the beginning of life itself. You have to start thinking in that term, how these islands then divided into separate countries, and then how, what was the population then before some 100 years, and then how the population has been increasing, and what it has reached to. This is something is impossible for you to finish in your one lifetime practically. So you have to identify certain span of a time. For example, increase in population in last 10 years. This is also not enough, because in last 10 years, again, in every country, every different region, every different upheaval, which is impossible to cover. So you can say, minimize it again, narrow it down, and bring it to a small point where you can start investigating. See, you have to write around 300 pages, right? Not some sequence of the theses. You have to compile your data in just one thesis. So your topic also has to be limited. But limited doesn't mean that it should be very narrow. It should have certain amount of scope to collect ample data and get ample data to analyze, investigate, and get some concrete results. So you can simplify it and narrow it down to, let's say, population changes or population rise in last 10 years in India, or in particular state in India, or in southern parts of India, or northern parts of India, eastern parts of India, or something like that. You can find like some few states or just one state, and you can talk about that. Even state is also very huge thing. You can even narrow it down, and you can take particular place like a big city like Pune, Bombay, Delhi, or some let's say Telangana or something like that. So you can, so your study has to be a focus study. At the same time, it should be a top-down study. Your aim has to be certain, which can be achievable in a stipulated time frame. Because when you take admission for any doctoral thesis, let's say doctoral studies, in order to complete thesis, even if you go for your undergraduate thesis writing, that is also for 6 months. Doctoral studies is around 5 to 7 years. So your study has to finish in that time frame. It should not keep on going and spending your life in it, and you are leading nowhere. You are leading to no conclusion. Because if you do not conclude a study in a fixed time frame, then the results that you have arrived today will be changed definitely after 2 years and 5 years and 10 years. So your study will fail there. It will go null. Do you understand? So always decide certain kind of topic which should be achievable within the time frame allocated by that particular degree that you have chosen. Understood? You also have to identify the importance of that particular topic. If that topic is really essential to be investigated, for example, health hazards happening due to plastic and how it is creating havoc in certain particular part. Have you heard about mica mining? Mica is a shimmering product that we find in the earth, inside the earth. So people dig mines, and then they find this mica in it. So mining for mica is very risky, and it is found in a certain a part of Rajasthan in India. Okay, and the community which lives there are very poor people, and they keep on digging it out and it is dug in a very, and the soil there is not a firm soil. So when they dig this, they keep on digging it out, and if the problem is they dig very small holes, so they can send only small children there. Adults cannot enter there. So if they send small children inside, the small children sometimes get caught in it because the debris of the sand falls down on that. I mean, the soil which is mixed with the sand falls on that, and they get buried under it, and it becomes very difficult also for the crowd to remove the sand out and find the body out. It becomes too late for them. So this is a kind of study that I came across, which was done by an American scholar who was not Indian definitely, and they came, investigated, and proper. They done study and they put forth the data in documentary form, and then in thesis form also. They faced lot of threats also because it was a huge kind of scam going on through some political backgrounds, backups, where human life was not much value. So in this scenario, you can think about how important is this topic, how important is this area where people should get aware about it. This is something is very dangerous happening. You should stop using plastic. If you want to lessen the production of plastic, you have to first stop using it out. If you want to lessen the plastic on earth, you have to stop the production. When the production will be stopped? When you will stop using it out. Unless and until there is less demand, the production will not be stopped. So you can apply the demand and supply theory here. So in this way, you have to identify the importance of your topic. At the same time, you should explore for something that has not been explored before, or might be that has been concluded in a wrong way or in a different way. We cannot say that somebody has concluded study in a wrong way. It might be in a different way altogether. So you have to go for certain topic which should give you scope to contribute something new. Second, identify what is expected. There are some ethics, protocols, modules of your writing. Please study those carefully. When you take admission, the universities give you handbooks, student handbooks, where the research ethics, the protocols are written, and please abide by that. At the same time, there are various referencing styles. For example, I am citing some data. For example, I am collecting a data for minings happening in India for mica. Now, I am a very novice. I have not been to this field, to that particular stop in a spot in Rajasthan, and I have not seen it. I have not witnessed it with my very own eyes. I am relying more on the data that I have watched and heard and read in the thesis or in the documentary done by that American scholar. So I am actually taking a reference from her studies. So whenever I am writing something, I have to thank her or I have to cite that this data is taken from American scholar study. It is not my own data. So this is what is called as referencing or citation. So you have to every time cite from the source of the information, source of your writing again has various styles. For example, let's say in arts and humanities, usually MLA style or APA style is used, whereas in science, it is more of Chicago. But it again depends from universities to university, countries to countries. For example, in universities in UK, they use Howard style of referencing. So you have to just check it out with your university, which referencing style is recommended to be used for you. If you don't get that information, best thing you can do is check some previous works by the scholars from your own department. I mean, their thesis, whatever they have done, study the way they have written, the style should they have, reference style should they have used, and just follow that. How is a thesis structured? Just before this slide, I have talked about various steps involved in your thesis. You have to just remember and understand what kind of style, thesis you will be writing. So are you supposed to go for a discussion section separately, or will you be combining it with the result section? You have to check it out once. Then you also have to consider what type of sources or materials are you going to use. So I may think that I'm going to collect data from American scholars. You have to first check it out. Is it possible for you? Are they accessible to you? Do you have accessibility to them? Can you go approach them? So are you planning to travel there, or are you planning to have an online interaction? So let's say I have some American friends, but how many are they? Only 5 or 10 people may not be sufficient. Even if I decide to take an interview or take the Google form from, I need ample people because this is a thesis writing. This is a large piece of academic writing. It is not some small paper or small essay. Understand? So you have to always target an ample amount of data. And so you have to consider the source of data collection beforehand you start your studies. And you also have to check how accessible it is for you, how approachable it is for you. You know, it should be feasible for you. What forms of analysis are perceived as appropriate? So this is what everything you will get in the information guidelines of your department or of your university. So before you start writing or before you start going ahead with your studies, you better study all these essentials like ethics, protocols. So for example, plagiarism, the rules for plagiarisms and all. You have to just go through all these things in advance. Another step, third step involved here is have a clear goal and structure. Whenever you start writing, before that, an itinerary has to be clear in your mind. A roadmap has to be ready in your mind that this is what I am aspiring to do, and this is where I will be reaching. So you should be very clear about the objective of your study and about the goal of your study. Aims and objective. What is your objective of the study and what do you aim through your study? So I will be starting from here and I will be reaching here. So when I will be starting here and reaching here, how will I go? What path will I use? What vehicle will I use? Vehicle is methodology or tools and techniques of your study, techniques of your research. Okay. So you have to be very clear about that. You have to set a goal, then you have to structure your research. You should have that roadmap. For example, I will be collecting data from this source. So this is my target audience, or this is my target data collection. Then you should also fix about the sample of your study, sample size of your study. So I'll be targeting 100 people, or I'll be targeting 100 teachers, or 50 teachers, or some 20 non-native people, something like that. So your sample size also has to be fixed. Your methodology also has to be fixed. For example, am I going for a qualitative analysis? So relying on the historical evidences or on the studies of other scholars. Will I be taking it from articles and theses or books or scholarly publications? Only will I be relying on that, or will I be going there on field? So on-field study is different. That will be investigated through other kind of methodology. Or else you may go for only quantitative analysis. And the quantitative analysis involves numericals, numbers, digits. So where shall I collect these numbers from? So shall I collect it from some government website? Will I refer to some graphs, charts, or data already given there? For example, how medicinal plants are there on the certain hills, let's say in Pune. So how will I get data? Because I cannot go and count 1, 2, 3, 4. I should have some reliable resource, but understand those resources has to be very authentic. You cannot rely on something which is very random. You can take information from official government official websites. Let's say in the case of population, where will you get data of rise in the population in last Maharashtra, or in, let's say, in Pune or something like that? I'll get the exact data, the correct amount of data on the government website. I cannot go and in some government offices or interview various people or some officials or something like that, which will be something over targeting. Do you understand over targeting? So this is something beyond your capacity. So you should also think about the target data collection, source of the data collection, and the size of the data collection before you start. A lot of reading and a lot of researching is very important, because this is how you will always get new approaches, new understanding. At the same time, it is also a way which will help you to understand that whatever you are aiming at is not done. Else you will same thing and end up somewhere which is not much worthy, and that will just waste your energy. Please understand, it is a very lengthy journey. It's a huge, this degree needs huge amount of efforts, and it claims a huge amount of time from your life. It is not some 1 year or 2 year program, degree program that you are doing with some fixed syllabus. It does not have any syllabus. It does not have any structure, fixed structure. It has a skeleton. It has a skeleton. Introduction, chapterization, methodologies, hypothesis, statement of problem, conclusion, so on. It is there. Everything according to a new researcher, new scholar's choice, the thesis is going to change. So it will not be the same book again. It will not be the same book from which the other scholar will also be studying and giving the same examination. Understand that. And that ample research is very important before you start writing for your research. Structuring and restructuring. Never think that thesis writing is an overnight miracle. It is a very long journey, a journey of patience rather. It is, it needs and very important things. It needs lot of consistency. Day one, I had started with my study for my doctoral thesis. I have continued for 1 month, and then I have slowed down, and I feel that, oh my God, now I don't understand what should I do next. Or I'm relying on something, the data to be published by some government website on after 3 months. Then next 3 months, I won't be doing anything. Don't do this mistake. Many scholars do this mistake because thesis dependent on some third party, some other source. So you have to be very careful when you go for choosing your topic, basically. Second party sources. You always have to be careful to achieve, to target certain sources which are achievable. Okay. Now, next point is drafting and proofreading. So whenever you draft your thesis for the first time, there are of mistakes. There might be few things which you will feel like changing. For example, there are ample additions later on, or else you may feel that I have repeated several points. Then you can minimize those points. You can eliminate, you can delete those points, and you can add some new perspectives if you need. At the same time, you always have to go for proofreading. Error-free writing is highly recommended. It has to be grammatically correct, error-free. It has to be contextually correct. Unless and until there is some logical order in your writing or logical setup followed for your write-up, it will not be considered. Understand that. Write as you go. So, sorry. So when I say about proofreading, how will you do that? First, you are the most reliable source. It is your work. So you have to read, reread, and reread several times. At the same time, you have the proofreading by your peers. You give it to your friend who is, a thesis writing or research. That person will definitely guide you out for if there is some mistake in the steps of your research or structure of your research. At the same time, definitely your supervisor will help you out with the same thing. But before you submit your draft to the supervisor, it is your responsibility as a scholar to proofreading and make it foolproof. So there won't be ample burden. Supervisor can better focus on some contextual and some quality guidance to you. Okay. At the same time, you can even find some expert in language that you are writing in, for example, scientific English, or might be English for psychology, English for social sciences, or something like that. That person will help you out to rectify the grammatical mistakes. Please don't rely only on Grammarly, because sometimes Grammarly does not work properly. So better you take it get it proofread by human being rather than relying on AI. Okay, right as you go. So whenever you start, when you ultimately finalize your topic, I'm going to work on this topic. I'm going to do research on this topic. From day one itself, whatever comes in your mind, start putting it on a piece of paper. Doesn't matter every word, each and every word you are going to use in your thesis or not. It's okay. This is kind of brain mapping that you have to do. Unless and until you do a brain mapping, you don't understand about pluses, minuses of your study, the loopholes of your study. At the same time, when you start writing, it will trigger your brain in order to activate your nerves in order to move towards innovation and creativity. So that's why this writing is very important. At the same time, human memory has limitation. Understand, we are not demigods. Has limitation. If I ask you what you ate 10 days back, three or let's say in your morning meal or afternoon meal on last Saturday or last Wednesday, let's say random day, it will not be easy for you to remember in just one go. So understand, we do have limitation. You start writing it out. May possible that some point is some extraordinary point that later on you may feel like, oh wow, this is wonderful addition that definitely should go in my thesis, or that will give you a new perspective. Whenever you feel diverted, I'm not leading anywhere, you can open your notebook and you can check whatever you have written. That will also help you out to have a brain map, a road map, and then you can then later on lead. This is very helpful. Check that you have addressed everything. So whenever you finally write your thesis, cross check with your notebook. So make sure that you have added every point that is very important in your write-up. Okay. Then you always have to take frequent backups and research notes. Now, definitely we are living in digital era, and most of us do have exposure to computers, laptops. So better rely on yourself and start typing your own thesis rather than giving, writing in a piece of paper, giving it to somebody, which used to happen previously. So say you write your on your own because you understand your own path really well. You have your own clear mindset, and you know where to write what, and what is your limit to which you have reached to. So it will help you out. At the same check out if there is something remained, something which has triggered you as an important point. If you miss that, please add it on. So take your sweet time, have patience, revise it peacefully, have a mental break. Once again, go back to your thesis after the break and just have a look, have a fresh look. So you will identify the gaps. If you constantly be in it, it will be very difficult. Always keep track of study, keep motivating yourself, keep pushing yourself hard. If you have decided to lead to that target, then you have to be mentally prepared that I am going to work consistently, I'm going to put efforts, and I am going to contribute something of some value. So you have to push yourself. Always keep track of your study. Continue to question. Maintain a questioning and critical mindset. Whatever you have written, don't think that it is a final conclusion. Always check out what you have written and counter question your own statement. Is it correct? Is there any kind of different interpretation possible? If possible, then what would be? If somebody reads the statement, what that person will lead to? You can even ask your friend to read that statement and understand what it is. Because many times what happens, we are looking from this angle. If somebody is looking from third angle, and that person is looking from different perspectives, so may interpret in a different way. So don't leave any scope for ambiguity. At the same time, critical mindset and questioning ability will always give you some feed for innovation, creativity, and this is how is the research instinct, research ability. The questioning and critical mindset only always finds out a research problem and always has potential to lead towards the conclusion or solutions to a research problem. You have to be very sure, very convinced about a statement that you have made. Until you convince yourself, you are not able to convince other people and your readers. Understand? So you have to convince yourself. My, research supervisor used to always tell me, you have to read your thesis 100 times. And then I used to have a huge question mark on my face. He used to say, it's your work. If you feel that you are bored of reading it again and again, definitely the next person is going to get bored. So it means that there is a high scope to make changes in your writing. And that happened to be true. And that gave me always a motivation to make my writing interesting, uh, creative, and innovative. So whenever I used to write that out, whenever I used to read it out again and again, I used to feel elevated. I used to feel like contributing something in it. Or at certain point, I used to feel very satisfied. So this is how it happens. And this is why you read and revisit your thesis again and again. You have to have question ability, critical mindset, and convince yourself for the same. Explain your reasoning, forming, and strong arguments. Your arguments has to be very strong, very convincing. Of references. So don't forget to give bibliography under which you cite all the references. The sources you have taken. Your research has to be very well structured, coherent, and polished. There should be a logical connection in the thought that you have demonstrated in the form of your thesis. It should not be, somewhere losing control of mind of yours. It should move smoothly, flow smoothly in a sequence. So you always have to follow the skeleton that has been sufficient time for proofreading and check. Always and finalizing your thesis before you submit. Understand you have spent, let's say, 4 years of your life or 5 years of your life. Spend at least check it properly. Each and every word, read it carefully. Unless and until you feel satisfied or convinced, don't go to the next word. Or main argument has to be supported by relevant citations. For example, if I make some argument that population in last 10 years best is statement up with sample data. So I have to give links
Excuse me,
for.
ma'am. Ma'am, your
Yes.
voice is breaking at times, ma'am.
Okay. Give me a moment, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Just check. Am I audible properly? Hello.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible now, ma'am. At times,
Okay,
ma'am.
might be some
Yes, ma'am, you're
network
audible,
issue,
ma'am.
I guess. Okay. So, whatever arguments you make, you always have to support those arguments with a very concrete data. Please change the next slide. Concrete data. And that concrete data has to be always a reliable source of information. For example, some official government official website through which I am citing some data. So that will prove what I am saying, that how was the hike in last 10 years and how was the hike, especially in the last year, rise in the population, right? So this is how you have to make sure that your contribution has to be concrete. At the same time, always back up and support your research with some influential and important theories in your field. Unless and until there is a background or backup of a theory, whatever you just randomly say or conclude will not have any value. So always have some base for your study, base for your research. So when you identify certain area in order to conduct a research, try to find out which theory you can back up with the argument or your research problem and conduct your research. You have to identify that. Next slide, please. So this is a standard structure form of any thesis that we write. Just I'm just reading out. So title page, acknowledgement, abstract, and so on. You can go on to the next page, please, because I have explained in detail. So let's say this is your first page. This is how it should look, very beautiful, neat and clean. So you have to follow the font size, font style, and formatting, rules and regulations given by the university. Only then this is going to look neat and clean. So especially the front page is always in central alignment with bold, your title of the thesis, your name. And you had to write the date and date in the sense that month and year of publication of your year of submitting your thesis and so on. So this is how is the usual sequence. Don't forget to put the logo of the university and so on. Next page, please. The other whole part of your thesis usually goes into justified alignment. So it looks nicely equal from both the sides. So Times New Roman 12 font is ideal, usually used, or else you can read always the guidebook, the guideline book that has been provided by the university. Page of acknowledgement is a very beautiful page according to me and very important, a very humble page where you have to thank to all those people who has helped you out in order to accomplish your thesis. Those might be your supervisors, the head of the department, your friends, your teachers, other research scholars, family, and so on. So this is a page where you can thank them for that. So please, next page, please. Abstract. Now, abstract is an important document in your research. Okay. So whatever you have written, it is just a kind of reflection or an opening door to your thesis. So you have to put more efforts and make your abstract interesting. So it is a sort of short summary of your thesis, which is usually 150 words in research paper, not in thesis, but it goes around 300 pages to, in some cases, if you have a lengthy piece of thesis, then it goes around in 1 page, not beyond 1 page for sure. So you have to make sure what are things you will be writing in abstract. What are your aims? Okay. Thereafter, you have to describe which methodology you will be using and what are the major conclusions you have arrived at. Only major conclusions. In order to understand major results, the person has to read your thesis in detail. At the same time, you have to write about your major statements here in your research. So although abstract is very short and thing and the first page, please make sure when to write an abstract. First finish your writing, whole thesis, read it out carefully, and then write abstract. Though abstract is the initial page of the thesis, but never write your abstract beforehand. See, understand a very logical point. Unless and until you conclude your study, how will you understand what is your conclusion? You have to add your conclusion in your abstract. So abstract is always unfinished unless and until you finish your study. So always make sure that your abstract has to be written at the end of your thesis. Next page, please. So this is a table of content. So under table of content, you have to cite everything in detail. What are things are there in your whole thesis, like chapters, thereafter headings and subheadings of the chapters along with the page numbers. If you have written abstract or if you have given, let's say, miscellaneous words or list of figures or abbreviations or something like that, everything will be there in the page or table of content. Next slide, please. Then goes list of figures and tables. In many studies, scientific studies especially, we use a lot of tables and figures in our study. At the same time, some words are very new to the readers. There are some new words, especially technical terms, which are uncommon. Then you have to compile it in the form of under the section of glossary and give a separate attachment of glossary in your thesis. If you are using some abbreviations which are not internationally recognized, such as WHO, okay, or US, that stands for United States, right? Then you have to give the list of abbreviations along with the long forms of it. Next page, please. So this is how is the introduction of your topic. That introduction, I have already covered everything in the steps itself. It is just a revision. So under introduction, you have to talk about what is your topic, what is your major purpose, that is aims and objectives, and how your study is relevant in today's era or to the upcoming scholars, and who will be largely benefited by your study. So you have to talk about scope and limitation of your study and something like that. Next page, please. So you should do ample literature review before you go for your thesis writing practically. So ample literature review in the sense that whenever you conduct some study, you read about that, you try to find out facts and figures about that. So whatever article, book, or let's say lecture series you are hearing, or any newspaper article you are reading, cite everything out under the literature review. So how literature review is written. So you have to write the title, give the details in the style sheet, MLA or APA style sheet, and then you have to give a small, tiny summary of that particular article and how that article is related to your major study. Why should we do this literature review? Because literature review helps us to identify the research gaps. It also helps us to build the parallel links. For example, if I'm doing some study on women health and women education in India, and if I cite some article which is written by African women health and women education in Africa, then there is a parallel link. These two studies are in two different countries, but there are some similarities and differences that I can identify and propagate in my study. Okay, next slide, please. Next is methodology. So you have to be very careful when you choose your research methodology. You have to first identify what you want to go for. Is it, for example, you have to understand overall approach of your research. Is it qualitative in nature or quantitative in nature, experimental or ethnographic, or is it empirical study or something like that? According to that, you have to choose the correct method of study. You also can collect data from various methods like interviews, surveys, or archives, or even you can cite from some other government reports or something like that. Under methodology, you also have to identify where are you studying, I mean the target location of your study, when are you planning to study, I mean when this research has taken place, and with whom the research has, I mean who was your target sample of your study. So you have to identify and mention that in your methodology, under your methodology. You also have to talk about tools and techniques those you will be using for your research. Next page, please. So this is the section of results and findings, which is highly important. So whatever data you are analyzing, data you have collected, analysis of data, and the final results of those analysis has to be put forth in this section. So this section usually goes into 2 chapters, 1 or 2 chapters, depends on the size of your study. Next slide, please. This is a very major and important section in your research, and this is where you are contributing. Discussion section. So under the discussion section, you are talking about scope and limitation of your studies. Thereafter, you also have to identify and contribute your major arguments, your statements, and support back up with proper statements, making proper concrete statements. And your major findings has to be reflected in here in this particular section. So this is a discussion section where you explore the meaning and implication of your results in relation to your research question, how you have investigated and identified and addressed the research question that you have choose for your study. This is also a section where you can talk about if you come across any unexpected result, and you can also offer some explanation for why this might have happened. So it is a very good idea to consider always alternative interpretation of your data and discuss any limitations that you are facing. So here, the upcoming research scholars also get a scope. Whatever will be your limitation might be a new, opening door for the researcher to explore more for the new study. Next slide, please. So this is a conclusion section where you have to conclude your research. It should be concisely answered the main research question, how you have made the answers of your main research problem, research question. Then leaving the reader with a clear understanding of your central argument. It is a final reflection on what you did and how you conducted your study. It is also a recommendation for research or practices, especially an inspiration and motivation to the further researchers, scholars. It may also open for the arguments, you never know. It also talks about how your findings contribute to the knowledge in the existing field. And why your research matters is also addressed here in the portion of conclusion. What you have added to what already was known, here you can mention clearly. Next slide, please, is the referencing list. I have already talked about that. That you have to identify according to your stream, whether you have to use MLA, APA, Chicago, or such as law school students use Oscola, or in UK they prefer Howard referencing style or Vancouver reference style. So this depends on that. Next slide, please. Appendices is additional information to your major body of your thesis. For example, if you have conducted interviews and taken it on a piece of paper, you can add those interviews also as a part of appendices. Or else, for example, you have done a field study where you have taken photographs of witness something. Then you can document those photographs in the appendices. Next point, please. These are certain mistakes, those you have to avoid. That don't skip the preliminary pages like acknowledgement, declaration, okay, of your thesis and so on. Abstract of your thesis should not be longer than 1 page. Your thesis should not have multiple formatting problems. I mean, please abide by the style sheet recommended by your university. If they recommend Times New Roman 12 font with 1.5 line spacing, which is ideal, or single line spacing, with justified in full block or semi-block format, go for that. Do not make a mix of full block and semi-block altogether. So you have to be careful about that. Then your thesis contains words from the proposal stage. You have to be very careful because many people, what do? Whatever is your proposal, you just copy and paste it in either first or second chapter. So don't understand when you write a proposal, the tense you use is a future tense because you are planning to conduct your study. But when you write a thesis, you have already finished your study and you are compiling the results, findings in the form of a thesis. So your tense has to be past tense, simple past tense, or past perfect tense. You have to be very careful about that. Your thesis contains academic integrity violation, that is copying, pasting. So a big no to the plagiarism. So you have to abide by the plagiarism rules. At the same time, at times, below 10% is allowed, because certain definitions, names of the books or names of the authors, we cannot avoid, and that is also considered under plagiarism. But if you give proper citation to every definition name from where you have taken, then it automatically gets removed from the plagiarism. Please, that happens. It happened with me also. I did that. So when I wrote my thesis for the first time, I mistakenly forgot to give citation to certain definitions. So my plagiarism suddenly hiked to 16%, which was not acceptable even to me. Then I was guided by a person who was taking care of plagiarism in the university, and then he told me that how, let's say in Turnitin, if you do it, it highlights in red, blue, yellow, green, various colors, and it also gives you resources. So you can cite those resources under your bibliography and references. So that automatically goes from your plagiarism. So ultimately, my plagiarism was just 3%. Your thesis contains grammatical errors, jargons, unclear paragraphs, or ambiguity. A big no to it. You are writing whatever language you choose, Marathi, Sanskrit, Tamil, Malayalam, or English, let's say, you have to use that language flawless. No scope for grammatical errors at all. Don't use old words or cliche or archaic words which are not in practice. If you are using some of these terminologies, then please explain it in your glossary. So it will help the reader to have a clear understanding of what you want to say exactly. Next slide, please. So this is how, if you follow all these things carefully, if you abide by basic rules, dedication, consistency, motivation to your writing, and a clear mindset, then nobody can stop you finishing your research within a short span of time, whatever stipulated time. Please do not invest your life unnecessary, lengthy, spending many more years in writing a thesis than expected. Few people cannot abide by the time because they sleep, they go in hibernation for initial few years and suddenly awaken at the end moment when your research is supposed to be submitted within a year or 6 months. Understand, it's not an overnight miracle. I'm telling it once again. It's a long journey which is traveled or covered only through consistent, persistent walk. Dedication and hard work is highly recommended. Thank you so much. The session is open for discussion.